You took $15,000 from Dad's estate account. Everyone knows it was you. Wire it back by Friday or we're calling the police. That was the voicemail my brother left me on a Tuesday while I was sitting in the parking lot of the hospital where I work, eating a granola bar before a 12-hour shift. I listened to it twice, then I sat there for a minute, just staring at the steering wheel. I hadn't taken anything, but that's the thing about being the quiet one in a family like mine. When something goes wrong, the finger always finds you first. Let me back up. My dad passed away 8 months before any of this happened. Pancreatic cancer. It moved fast. Diagnosed in March. Gone by July. He was 67 years old, and up until the diagnosis, he'd been the kind of man who still mowed his own lawn and argued with the neighbors about whose oak tree was dropping leaves on whose side of the fence. Watching him go from that to a hospital bed in 4 months was one of the hardest things I've ever done. I was the one driving him to appointments. I was the one sitting with him on the nights my brother was too busy. I was the one who held his hand on the last day. I'm not saying that to make myself the hero of the story. I'm saying it because you need to understand the full picture of what came after. Dad was organized, methodical. He'd updated his will a year before he got sick, almost like he knew something was coming. Though I think he just finally got around to it. He left the house to my brother and me equally to be sold and split. He left a small sum to our aunt. The rest of the estate, including his savings account, was to be liquidated and divided between us after probate. I was named executor. That last part is what started all of this. My brother has never liked me being responsible for anything that affects him. Even when we were kids, he had this thing where he couldn't stand not being in control of a situation. He's the older one. He's the one with the MBA. He's the one who bought a house in a nice suburb and married a woman who sends Christmas cards with professional photos on them. In his mind, I'm the younger sister who became a nurse and rents an apartment and doesn't have a husband, which apparently means I'm not to be taken seriously. When Dad named me executor, my brother called me within 24 hours of the will being read. He didn't lead with grief. He led with logistics. He wanted to know the timeline, the account numbers, the appraisal schedule for the house. I told him I'd handle everything according to the will and keep him updated. He said, "Just make sure you don't let anything slip through the cracks." I said, "Okay." I knew what he meant. The next 8 months were some of the most exhausting of my life. I was working full-time, grieving my father, and simultaneously navigating probate court, 2 different financial institutions, a real estate agent, a house full of 40 years of accumulated furniture and clothing and paperwork, and a brother who emailed me at least 3 times a week asking for status updates on things I'd already told him. I kept records of everything: spreadsheets, scanned documents, email confirmations. I'm a nurse. I document by instinct. It's just how my brain works. Every transaction that came out of my father's estate account had a corresponding receipt and a paper trail going back to the original bank statement. The house sold in November. Probate cleared in January. I transferred my brother's share of the estate on a Thursday afternoon, directly into the account he'd specified in writing. I kept a screenshot of the wire confirmation. I sent him an email with the full accounting attached. Every expense, every transaction, the final distribution amount, the confirmation number. He read the email. I know he did because he replied 2 hours later with a 1-line response. Got it. That was in January. The voicemail came in March. You took $15,000 from Dad's estate account. Everyone knows it was you. Wire it back by Friday or we're calling the police. I sat in that parking lot and I felt something I hadn't expected to feel. Not panic, not anger, not right away. Just this deep, tired, bone-level exhaustion. Because I'd done everything right. I had documented everything. I had been meticulous and careful and honest. And here we were anyway. I called my best friend on my lunch break. She's known my brother since we were in high school together. And when I read her the voicemails, she went quiet for a second and then said, "He's out of his mind." I told her I didn't know what to do. She said, "You document it, same as you always do, and then you prove it." She was right, of course. That's what I should do. But there was a part of me that wanted to call him back immediately and scream at him, wanted to ask him what he thought I had to gain, wanted to ask where he'd been when I was scheduling oncologist appointments and driving 3 hours round trip twice a week and organizing hospice care while he was flying to Scottsdale for a business conference. I didn't call him. I went back to work. Over the next few days, the calls escalated. My brother called twice more. His wife called once, a stiff, rehearsed-sounding call, where she said she hoped we could resolve this privately. Then my aunt called. The one my dad had left a small sum to, and I could tell from her voice that she'd already been talked to. She didn't come right out and accuse me, but she said, "Honey, if there was a mistake, it's better to just make it right." A mistake. As if I'd accidentally moved $15,000 into my own account without noticing. I asked my aunt if anyone had actually looked at the bank statements. She got quiet. I asked her if anyone had asked to see the probate accounting I'd filed with the court, which is public record. She said she didn't want to get in the middle of it. I told her I understood, and I said goodbye, and I hung up and I cried for about 10 minutes in my car, because my aunt has been one of the softer presences in my life since my mother passed, and hearing doubt in her voice from her hurt in a way I hadn't prepared for. Then I wiped my face and I got to work. I pulled every document I had. The full estate accounting I'd submitted to the probate court. The bank statements from my father's account going back 2 years, which I had copies of because I'd been helping him manage his finances in the last year of his life. Every wire confirmation, every receipt for estate expenses, the filing fees, the attorney's fees, the real estate agent commission, the cost of clearing out the house, and the dumpster rental, and the utility bills I'd kept running until the property sold. The email I'd sent my brother in January with the complete accounting attached. His reply? Got it. I also called the bank. I explained that I'd been the executor of an estate account that had since been closed and that there was a family dispute about the distribution, and I asked what documentation they could provide to confirm the transaction history. They told me I could request certified copies of the account statements, which I did. Then I called a probate attorney. Not because I'd done anything wrong, but because I wanted to understand what my options were if this escalated. She looked over what I described, and she told me what I'd suspected. The estate accounting I'd filed with the court was a matter of public record. And if my brother was claiming I'd misappropriated funds, the paper trail I had would be straightforward to verify. She also told me that making false accusations of financial elder abuse or estate fraud can have legal consequences. I want you to know that I thought about just sending my brother a copy of everything and being done with it. Just emailing him the spreadsheet and the bank statements and saying, "Here, look, I didn't take anything, leave me alone." Part of me wanted that to be enough. Part of me wanted the simple version, where I showed him the truth and he felt bad and apologized and we moved on. But I'd watched him build this narrative for 2 months. He'd called our aunt. He'd sent his wife to call me. He'd left me a voicemail threatening the police. He hadn't asked a single question. He'd made a declaration. And I knew that if I just emailed him quietly, he would find some way to reframe it, some way to make it look like I was being defensive, or like the documents were somehow insufficient or suspicious. He's good at that. He's been doing it our entire lives. So instead, I called him, and I said I'd like to meet in person to go over the estate accounting together. I said I had all the documentation, and I wanted to walk him through it face to face. He said, "Why can't you just send it?" I said, "Because I want to look you in the eye when you see it." He agreed to meet at our aunt's house the following Saturday. I think he was expecting me to come empty-handed, or to come nervous, or to come with apologies and an explanation for a discrepancy that didn't exist. I think he'd already decided how that meeting was going to go. I drove the 90 minutes to my aunt's house on a cold Saturday morning in early spring. I had a folder with me, printed copies of every document I just described, organized chronologically. I also had my laptop, and I'd set up a presentation, not a flashy one. Just the bank statements, the wire confirmations, and the court filing displayed in order so there was no ambiguity about the sequence of events. My brother was already there when I arrived. His wife was with him, which I hadn't expected, though I probably should have. My aunt had made coffee. The three of them were sitting at the dining room table when I walked in, and the energy in the room was the kind of tight, careful energy of people who've already had a conversation they don't want you to know about. I sat down. I didn't make small talk. I opened my laptop. I said, I want to go through the estate accounting together. I have every transaction documented and I want you to see it. My brother leaned back in his chair. He said, This is a simple question. There's $15,000 unaccounted for. Where did it go? I said, That's exactly what we're going to look at. I started with the bank statements, the full account history from the date my father was diagnosed to the date the account was closed. I walked through every outgoing transaction, attorney fees, probate filing fees, real estate agent commission, the cost of the estate sale company we'd hired to clear the house because there was more furniture than either of us could take, the dumpster, the utilities, the final homeowner's insurance payment I'd made to keep the property covered until closing. My brother's wife was writing things down in a little notebook. My brother had his arms crossed. My aunt was sitting very still. I got to the final distribution. I showed the wire confirmation, the date, the amount, the receiving account number, the account number he had given me in writing, in an email I'd printed and included in the folder. I pulled out the printed copy of that email and set it on the table. I said, This is the account you specified. This is the amount transferred. This is the confirmation number from the bank. And this. I reached into the folder and put the certified bank statement on top. Is the certified statement from the institution confirming every transaction in chronological order. My brother uncrossed his arms. He looked at the paper. His wife stopped writing. I opened the court filing on my laptop, the full estate accounting I'd submitted to the probate court, which it had been reviewed and approved, which is a public document which anyone could have requested at any point in the last 3 months. I turned the laptop to face him. I said, Does any of this look unfamiliar to you? The room was very quiet. My brother picked up the bank's statement. He looked at it for a long time. His wife leaned over and looked at it too. I watched his face go through several things, concentration, and then something else, something I recognized as the specific discomfort of a person who has said something loudly and publicly, and is now realizing they were wrong. He put the paper down. He said, There must be a discrepancy somewhere. I said, Where? He didn't answer. I said, I've shown you the original account statements, the certified copies from the bank, the wire confirmation to your account, the receipt for your account number in your own email, and the court-approved estate accounting. If there's a discrepancy, I need you to point to it. His wife said quietly, Maybe we should take some time to review everything. I said, I've had 2 months of voicemails and phone calls and a threat about the police. I'd like to resolve this today. My aunt spoke for the first time since I'd started. She said, Honey. And she was looking at my brother, not at me. My brother sat back. He looked out the window for a second, and then he said, I don't see where the $15,000 went, but that doesn't mean. I said, The $15,000 is in the accounting. It's line item 23. It was the estate attorney's final billing invoice for probate completion. I have the invoice. I opened to that page in the folder and put it on top. It's also in the court filing, page 8. He didn't pick up the invoice. I said, I'd like an apology. He looked at me. I said, You left me a voicemail threatening to call the police. You called our aunt and told her I'd stolen money from our father's estate. You spent 2 months treating me like a criminal for work I did carefully, and honestly, I'll say I was also grieving, while you were. I stopped myself. I took a breath. I'd like an apology. The room was quiet again. His wife said, We may have jumped to conclusions. I said, Yes, you did. My brother said, I'm sorry. And the way he said it, flat, quick, like something you say to get through a door, told me everything I needed to know about whether he meant it. I nodded. I started putting the papers back in my folder. My aunt said, Maybe we can all have some coffee, and I said, I'm going to head home. She looked at me with something pained in her face. I understood it. I really did. She wanted the afternoon to repair something. wanted the coffee and the sitting together to smooth it over. I love my aunt, and I know she didn't create any of this. But there was nothing to smooth over from where I was standing. My brother had accused me publicly, within the family. He'd planted doubt in my aunt's mind. He'd sent his wife to call me like I was a problem to be managed, and his apology had been 2 words delivered like an invoice. I hugged my aunt goodbye. I did not hug my brother or his wife. I drove the 90 minutes home in the kind of silence where you're not listening to music because your head is too full. I stopped at a drive-thru and got a large coffee, and I drank it on the highway, and I thought about my dad. I thought about how he used to say that the people who know you best can also hurt you in the most specific ways, because they know exactly where to aim. I thought about how he'd chosen me to be executor, not my brother. I used to think that was just a practical decision. I live closer. I'm more organized. But sitting in my car that afternoon, I thought maybe he knew something I was still learning. That was 6 months ago. I haven't spoken to my brother since that Saturday. I haven't called. He hasn't called. His wife sent me a text about 3 weeks later that said, "Hope you're doing well. Let's try to get together soon." I read it, and I set my phone face down on the counter, and I went back to whatever I was doing. My aunt and I still talk. She called me the week after the meeting, and she apologized. A real one, longer than 2 words, with pauses in it, the kind that costs something to give. I told her I wasn't angry with her. I meant it. She'd been handed a story, and she'd believed it, which is what stories are designed to make you do. A few months ago, a coworker asked me if I was close with my family. I thought about how to answer that for a second. I said, "I have an aunt I'm close with." She asked about siblings. I said, "I have a brother." She waited. I said, "We're not really in each other's lives." She nodded like that made sense. A lot of people nodded like that made sense when you said it. More than you'd expect. What I know is this. I did the right thing. I kept every record. I filed every document. I handled my father's estate with the kind of care he deserved from the person he trusted to do it. And when someone tried to rewrite that, someone who knows me well enough to know I wouldn't easily defend myself, someone who counted on the paper trail being too complicated for other people to follow, I did not collapse. I did not apologize for something I didn't do. I did not send a quiet email and hope it was enough. I sat down at a table in my aunt's dining room with a folder and a laptop, and I said, "Show me where." And there was nothing to show. I still have all of it, by the way. Every document in a fireproof box in my closet. Not because I think I'll need it. Probate is closed, the estate is settled, there's nothing left to dispute. I keep it because it's proof that I did what I said I would do. My dad asked me to handle his affairs and I handled them, and the record is there in writing, confirmed by a court and a bank and a certified statement. That's enough for me. And before I go, where in the world are you all watching from today? Drop it in the comments. I read every single one. And if this story hit close to home, if you've ever been the one who did everything right and still had to prove it, thank you for being here.